Out there in the forests of California, some trails never truly feel empty. People vanish. Whispers follow joggers at night, and campers wake to find their tents moved deeper into the trees. Welcome, friends, to Mr. Night Spook. Californians, these stories are especially close to your home, but no matter where you're watching from, drop a comment and let me know your location and what time it is right now. Many of you watch these videos without subscribing. Don't make that mistake. The next ones are even scarier. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because tonight we walk the trails where silence hides something darker. I was closing up the shop when the ranger stuck her head in and asked if the power was flickering on the east side of town. Friday night, last warm stretch before the fog shouldered in, baseball game low on the radio. The place smelled like rubber and oil. I handed her a flashlight from the rack and told her, "You learn to love the dark out here. If you don't, the trees will teach you." She said a UC Berkeley kid had gone missing in the park. His friend said he lagged to tie his boot and never caught up. Then she left me in a pool of quiet like a knocked-over cup. I slept badly, the way you do when a story keeps rattling the cupboards after lights out. Redwood nights are their own weather, a hush pressed up against the windows. The trunks don't sway so much as breathe. If you live long enough in a small town, you know the phrase that makes people harden: never caught up. Saturday I went out, not out of heroics. I fix bikes, sharpen blades, keep an old espresso machine going by spite. But I know those trails the way you know the floorboards in your own place. I parked where the map is sun-faded, and the bear warnings look quaint beside a tree that swallowed a fence post years ago. Cell service goes down there like a coin in a well. Searchers had been through already, boot prints constellating the edges, ribbons tied to branches, that cheerful, desperate flutter of plastic in a place that doesn't like plastic. I walked slow, calling the kid's name, Daniel. The way my voice went up the trunks and soaked into fernbacks made me feel young and small again. A banana slug crossed the trail like a bright thought moving through someone else's head. It took until the 3rd mile to find his backpack. I didn't see it first. I felt the wrongness like a draft in a closed room. Then there it was, propped neat as a sermon against a lightning-scarred redwood, shoulder straps squared, waist belt folded back on itself like a tucked-in tie. No scuff on the bark, no drag. In the pockets, compass, half a protein bar, laminated map. The zipper tab was looped with bright blue paracord, clean as if it had been washed and dried by hand. I did a dumb thing then. I stepped off trail. It isn't dramatic when you choose wrong. You just lean toward the thing that bothers you. The ground under the ferns turned to soft duff, bottomless until it decides to end. The light went green in a way your eyes don't trust. I kept one hand on the bark, because a tree that old feels like a person you don't want to surprise. That's when I heard the second pair of footsteps that were not mine. I froze so hard my teeth went hot. The sound came from the deeper grove, those elders that make you 12 inches tall no matter your age. It wasn't a deer. This was patient echo, a small lag, as if someone listened to my step and repeated it one beat late to see what I'd do. "Hello?" I said, and my voice softened at the edges as if the needles asked it to. No answer. Just that lagging step, stopping when I stopped, resuming when I resumed. I kept going because the only thing worse than walking toward it would have been walking away and letting it trail me like a rumor. The grove tightened up, not in space, but in spirit. Ferns to my chest, redwoods with fire-scarred portals you could walk inside. In one black hollow, the air blew colder in a steady way that didn't match the day. I saw something then between 2 trunks where the light fanned thin. A figure tall and very still, as if carved and set there to teach children patience. No color I can name, your eye slides off. I looked away and felt the itch in my fingers to kneel and tie my boot. It took a moment to understand my laces weren't loose. My hands had gone there on their own, miming a habit so the rest of me would lag. I stood too fast and the world tilted. The footsteps quit echoing and came forward. I don't run well on soft ground. I didn't run. I stepped back and lifted my hand like you would for a street dog. Palm out easy, good boy. "Daniel," I called, though I didn't mean it for him. The silence that answered had a shape to it. I heard a soft rubbing, not rope on bark exactly. Cloth on wood, a sleeve grazing as someone leaned. I tied a ribbon to a branch to mark the place and stepped back onto the trail with the careful gait of a man not wanting to wake a sleeping baby. At the split, I met 2 volunteers I knew by face and not by name. "See anything?" one asked. His pack, I said, and then, because I couldn't help it, it was neat. Neat like a parent making the bed of a child who's already gone. That night the wind came up and the trees talked over the roof like relatives arguing in a room you're not invited to. I retied my shoes 3 times without noticing. On the 3rd time I found a smear of the forest's red dust on my sock and couldn't decide if I'd brought it in or if it had followed me. On Sunday, after a potluck where no one mentioned the missing kid until the 3rd scoop of cobbler, the ranger asked me to come back with her, not for any special skill. She said I knew where not to step. The ocean was a dark stripe 2 ridges away. We drove in the easy silence of people who have both done something a little foolish and won't admit it. The pack was gone. The scarred tree stood the same. No paracord on the ground. A neat square scuff in the duff, as if something with corners had rested and then lifted. The ranger rubbed her jaw like she had a toothache. Sometimes families move things, she said, a line memorized for grief. Sometimes animals. Neither of us believed either. I showed her the hollow. Pointing felt like opening a door you were told not to open. We stood and listened. There's a lot of silence to hear if you let it. Wind moves at 2 heights in redwoods. Between them is a mean void where sound refuses to go. In that pocket, I heard the careful rub again. The ranger sucked in a breath and said in a voice that didn't belong to her, "Tie your boot." I looked at her laces. Perfect. And she blinked, shook herself like she'd walked through a web. "Sorry," she said. I don't know why I said that. On the way back, she fell a few steps behind, which put a heat in my neck that had nowhere to go. I slowed, she slowed. We were matching a 3rd tempo set by something that understood the offbeat better than we did. I said her name on purpose. She looked up too fast, like a student called on, and the spell thinned. We stepped onto the parking lot gravel with the relief you get leaving court without quite knowing what you'd been accused of. When the family arrived from the bay, the flyers showed a kid with a hopeful mouth and eyes still soft from classrooms. His mother asked if there was anything unusual. The ranger said after a small forever, "We found his pack." The woman nodded like a person receiving a bill. "He's tidy," she said. I almost said was and bit my tongue until I tasted iron. I saw the figure again on a Wednesday night, not in the woods, but 3 blocks from my shop where the streetlights stop because the budget runs out. It stood between 2 sycamores tall as a belief you don't know you hold, still in the way of stones. It didn't come toward me. It didn't need to. My hand went to my laces. They were tight. After that I noticed the neat things. A jacket draped over a trailhead sign as if someone had paced away and would be right back. A bicycle leaned carefully against a fence with the chain tucked into a gentle loop, like someone whispering to a horse. "Stay." A backpack on a bench with straps folded. If you ask around, you'll hear the old stories. A logger in 58 who stepped off the skid row to tap a wedge into a jam and never showed to lunch. They found his lunch pail set square under a stump. Napkin folded. A ranger in 84 who radioed. She was stopping to fix a bootlace and came back on the air 30 minutes later, sounding like a recording of herself played 2 rooms over. Men whose wives found their keys laid out straight on the dresser and knew before the phone rang that something had waited and been obeyed. I don't think it hunts. Hunting has hurry. This thing waits the way a line of trees waits for a fence to give up and be absorbed. It knows our habits so well it doesn't have to chase. We're the ones who stop. We're the ones who put things down carefully with the intention of coming back, as if intention were a leash. Last week they found one of Daniel's boots in a creek bed, leather dark, laces white as bone. The single print led from the trail and then from nowhere. Around it were the prints of the searchers and the dog. The boot had been set heel against a stone, exact. They photographed and bagged it and there was nothing else. The family went home with different eyes. If you want an ending, I don't have one. I'm telling you what happened so you'll know the other rule. Not the one in the brochures about tides and cougars. When the forest leans close and something in you leans back, don't. When your hand goes to a lace that isn't loose, keep it at your side. When you set something down, set it messy. Let the straps fall. Pull the belt into a rude twist. Refuse the tidiness it asks for. Don't lag. Don't be polite. And if you ever do step off trail, leave your pack crooked. Leave a sign only the rude would understand. Maybe that's how we'll know where you went. Or maybe the only trace will be the neat square of dust where you intended to return. And the echo of your footsteps learning the offbeat, following you into the green that swallows names and gives back only a silence, shaped like a person who means to wait forever. I didn't start running to get fit. I started because my apartment learned my schedule. The keys on the counter, the fridge hum, the blue glow holding me like a fish to glass. A patient at the clinic told me Griffith Park saved her in a bad year. Go when the city goes quiet. The coyotes keep you honest. I went because I needed somewhere I hadn't already talked myself into a corner. The back switchbacks feel cut with a pocket knife, steep, dusty, deliberate. Eucalyptus lean with a drunk's grace. Every turn deals you another bright card of Los Angeles. The Greek theater thumps from far away. The freeway hums like weather. I ran after work, after microwave dinners, after promising I'd call people I didn't call. On my third night, a woman came down in the tunnel of a headlamp. She was barefoot, hair pasted to her temples, soles black with dust. She didn't look at me so much as past me. "Don't answer," she whispered. Not to me exactly, but to the trail itself. "It wants you to answer." Then she was gone. Next morning, Lacey at the front desk said a ranger had walked a woman out at dawn, still mumbling, shaking like a long fever. I kept going because the park makes you lie to yourself and call it courage. After the second switchback, there's a gap where you can catch the observatory between leaves. I stopped there to bend and breathe. That's when I heard it, not a voice, more like a mouth shaping the steam of my breath. It said in my whisper, "You never called him back." The sound came from the chaparral to my left, where coyotes keep their courteous distance. I told myself it was the echo of my head. Runners talk to themselves. At the next bend, it fit my thoughts again, hand to glove. She didn't say it's over because she knows you'll hang up first. "Knock it off," I said, and felt suddenly visible to everything that listens. Dust took each footfall and made a soft animal sound. On the way down by eucalyptus that creaked like slow doors, the whisper waited. "You aren't tired," it said. "You're afraid of the part where you stop. Ask 10 runners about the whispers and half will smirk, while the other half watch the trees. They tell it like a joke and then offer something too precise, the exact phrasing of a drafted text, a childhood nickname, a door code never spoken aloud." Nights blurred. My calves adapted. The voice adjusted. It quoted a line from my father's last voicemail. "Hey kiddo, no rush." And once the shape of the bruise his belt left, oval with a tail. "I'm not talking to you," I told the dark. The leaves rattled with a breeze that didn't touch my skin. Lacey knew the barefoot woman. "Alondra," she said, from Atwater. "She keeps going back like she forgot where she set down her mind." Then she lowered her voice. She told my cousin the whispers knew what posters were on her bedroom walls when she was 9. That detail hurt in a private way. I have a handful of stories I tell about childhood. Venetian blinds, an alley cat that liked only me. But there's a thing I don't give away because it feels small as a seed. The glow-in-the-dark stars my mother stuck to the ceiling on a good day. That night I clipped a tiny recorder to my waistband, a habit from my father who said machines make people confess by accident. The trail was nearly empty. On the first switchback, the recorder caught crickets and the freeway's ocean roar. On the third, the whisper slid into place like a drawer closing. "You left her in the middle of her sentence," it said. And Nina's face arrived in my mind, tilted the way she does when she's trying not to wake the fight. Then it laughed, my laugh, the short breathy one I hate. After the laugh it changed. The breaths landed in the wrong places, a throat older than mine. "Kiddo," said my father's voice, perfect as if he stood behind me. "You always were such a good runner." I swung the headlamp through brush. A moth battered the lens. A coyote watched and didn't blink. The whisper used my mother's voice for a breath, then someone else's. "Come off the path," it said. I stepped into the scrub. The dirt changed, on the trail its grit. Off it the ground crumbles like old paper. The city vanished behind laurel sumac. Even the light thinned. The voice listed little things only I could put in order. Gum wrappers in the kitchen drawer, the single star I swallowed, the floorboard that clicks if you step just right. I put my hands over my ears and heard it in my palms. A beam cut across my eyes. "Hey!" A ranger came up with a mag light, thumb on the radio mic. Cruz his patch red. He saw the tilt of my head like I was keeping it on. "Trails this way," he said. "Rule 1, don't follow voices." He said it gently, like walking a drunk across traffic. "How many people follow?" I asked. He shrugged. "Enough, they mostly come back." He paused. "They come back different." He angled the light at my waistband. "Recording?" I glanced down at the red eye and hit stop. At home, the recorder sat like an insect. I lasted 10 minutes before I pressed play. The apartment held its breath while my voice split in two. I recognized my muttering, then the laugh that wasn't mine, and then his voice. Kiddo. The word went through me like a nail. Behind it lived something else, not a voice, but a hunger shaped like one. The sound of wind through bone. I didn't run the next night. I taped paper over the hallway vent because the idea of air whispering grew a body. The night after that, Nina brought back a book she hadn't finished. We made tea we didn't drink. You look like you're losing an argument with your pillow, she said. I told her I was fine. She touched my wrist. I used to run there at night, she said. It kept me sober when nothing else did. Then it started telling me things nobody knew. I stopped when it used my sister's voice. What did it say? I asked. She didn't answer. Do you still have that recorder? Yes. Don't take it back up there, she said. You think you're catching it. You're giving it a throat. A storm rolled in, rare and theatrical. Rain turned the trail to clay that gripped shoes. The rumor says the whispers get loud when the ground drinks. I went anyway because that's what addiction looks like when it wears your clothes. The lot shone like a dark mirror. On the first switchback, the voice didn't wait. It came from trunks, leaves, the wet air itself. You were right to come back, it breathed. You brought what we needed. My lamp found fresh prints, narrow, archless, bare. The rain should have smudged them, but water seemed to go around them. I followed despite everything, because sometimes the only way to get an image out of your head is to lay it over the real thing and see how it fails to fit. The prints ended in a little hollow. Something glinted that I thought was a bottle. It was a recorder. Mine. Except mine was on my kitchen table under a folded grocery list. The screen blinked play like an eye. I should have left it. I thumbed it. Rain and breath filled my ear. This moment, this hill. And then the file stepped ahead like a record that can see its next groove. It played my future footsteps, 1, 2, and then said what I hadn't. It told me I would kneel. It told me I would unlace my shoes. It told me I would leave them neatly side by side, then take a barefoot step. My hands went to my laces before my mind did. Something taller than a man stood in the brush, still as a turned-off machine. The voices came from where its chest should be. Too many, too close. Between them ran that wind-through-bone sound, a scaffolding for whatever voice it wanted. I understood then that it didn't care what it said so long as I looked into it. It wanted the shape of my attention the way a mold wants a foot. The recorder clicked and died. The dark rushed in, grateful. A coolness touched my ankle. Not a hand. Not an animal. A mouth shaped like a question pressed there and breathed in. I ran. Barefoot across stone is a prayer you don't plan. I tore my soles and didn't feel it until the lot. When I fell into my car, mud up to the shins, I looked back. Rain turned the trailhead to a veil. The recorder lay on the passenger seat, dark as a seed. I don't remember taking it. I haven't run since. I walk at noon with couples who stop to kiss under trees that look arranged by a movie scout. I tape the vents. I sleep with a fan. Some nights the metal rattles around 3 a.m., the way a grill shivers when it's trying to become a mouth. Lacey says Alondra moved back with her parents. She wears shoes to bed. Sometimes she wakes with dirt in the sheets that smells like wet chaparral and damp concrete. A cellar note I can taste when Lacey says it. Last night, Nina texted a photo of the observatory with the city glittering like a spread of cards. Don't go where voices know your name, she wrote. I put the phone face down and listened to the apartment breathe. In the fan's white noise and the fridge's old song hum, something tried to get its shape right. It said my name in 100 wrong ways. Then, for a single breath, it said it perfectly. The version I hear only when I'm not moving. The one you get when someone who loved you calls from the next room. I didn't answer. I counted my breaths until I could tell they were mine. Outside, somewhere up among the switchbacks, coyotes yipped and went quiet all at once, like an audience told to hush. I watched the blank spot on my ceiling where a star once was, and beyond it, pictured a mouth shaped like the city. Every window a tooth, every light a tongue. It doesn't want words. It wants breath. It wants the shape you make when you begin to say yes. Most Tuesday nights, I lock up Cliff's Auto and Marine alone, sweep the sand out of the bays, and listen to the foghorn talk to itself offshore. I was rolling the jack back under the workbench when Alma B from the Albion General Store came in with a jar of pickled eggs, and that look she keeps for bad news. They found a man on Navarro Ridge, she said, no hello. Barefoot, clothes dry in the soup, and he kept asking which shift he was on. She set the jar down like an altarpiece. Don't go up there tonight, Corey. On my way home, I swung by my sister's trailer because Milo, 16, generous-hearted, born with trouble stuck to his boots, had been night fishing. He met me on the porch with bandage tape peeking from his sleeves. "Thistles," he said, and didn't meet my eyes. Inside smelled like fried salmon. We sat at the tiny table with the plastic cloth, and after a minute he said too fast, "We saw them. Me and Jake and that girl with the green jacket from Mendocino High. Little lights, Uncle, like fireflies, but steady. They went into the trees like they knew a path." He worked at a smile that didn't arrive. "We followed for a bit," he said. "It felt like walking into your own thought." "You see anybody carrying them?" I asked. "Sometimes it felt like someone was walking beside us," he swallowed. "Talking without sound, like when you know someone's about to ask you for a favor." I stayed on the steps after he went to bed, thermos between my knees, watching fog lie down between the trees like a tired animal. The night went flat and regular. Drip surf a car miles away, drip. When it gets that metronome even, the old-timers say the woods are thinking. I told myself I'd stop by the sheriff's substation in the morning and keep my nose out of anything that smelled like someone else's story. Morning made a liar out of me. The recycling center lot was full of search and rescue volunteers stamping their boots and smelling like coffee and rope. Ranger Patel, forearms like cables, spread a map over his truck and briefed us. A couple from Sacramento hadn't come back from a trail spur near the old logging road. "We grid, we call everything in, we don't freelance," he said. "Radio's live. If you see lights, you report lights. You do not follow lights." We went in lines of 4. My partner was Rosa, a retired librarian who carried herself like a stern secret. "Alma says the lights are loggers," she murmured while we moved our line. "Camp burned down in 19-something. Men died, now they lure replacements. They want warmbacks, not company." I told her I didn't buy it. People see what they bring. She looked at me the way a reference desk looks at a foolish question and kept walking. We found a circle of crushed fern, a protein bar wrapper, and bare footprints headed the wrong way. Bare. That word makes you careful. Thimbleberry and Salal don't have mercy on naked feet. The prints went straight like a man to a mailbox, then began to arc. After 50 yards, we were walking a slow, perfect circle. In the middle was a smooth place where the needles were churned to shiny dirt, the color of old coffee. Danny, who runs the harbor coffee truck, chewed her lip. "We're the ones circling," she whispered. We just didn't know it yet. At first I thought it was the ocean. Then I realized there was a pace to it. Work song, regular call and response without words. Not voices so much as the shape of them. Names and shifts passed like invisible clipboards. My radio went dead in my hand with a politeness that felt personal. Danny's was dead too. Rosa's too. That was when the first light appeared between 2 trunks. Chest height the size of a plum. Steady winter white. Flicker would read as insect. Steady read human. A second showed to the right, and one behind us, and the faint clean thread of lamp oil braided the damp. "Call it in," Danny said, and I held up the mute brick of the radio like proof of a choice already made. We moved. Lamp oil threaded the damp air, impossible and undeniable. Once off to my left, a slant of motion like a man with a peavey. When I turned, there was only fog. The ground tilted. Boots scraped on slick rock. We came to the lip of a cut where a road once ran. Below lay the husk of a camp. Squared platforms dark with rot, barrel hoops, the rib of an engine. The lights drifted from object to object like careful inspection. Something inside my chest answered. A pressure like being late for a shift you didn't know you still had. Down was mean. The air tasted like the corner of a cupboard that never sees sun. In what had been the yard, we found a fallen beam with tally carved into it. Beneath 4 neat hash marks and a 5th slashed through. On a stack of flat rocks sat a tin lunch pail with a dent that asked for a thumb. I lifted the lid. A coil of twine, a stub of pencil, a feeling like seeing your name written in someone else's hand. The knot voices gathered closer now, saying shifts and days. The comfort of a schedule no one could fire you from. The pressure came then between my shoulders, not a shove. More like the warmth you feel when someone competent stands behind you and says, "I've got it from here." The lights formed a line toward a gap, where a skidding road would have run. Rosa didn't yank me. She set the dead radio back in my palm as if she were returning a library book. It broke the spell. Sound rushed back, the ocean dripped my own hard breath. I took a step backward, then another. The lights cooled a degree, disappointed, then brightened for the others. Danny was crying without sound. The kid in the Cal Fire hat had his head cocked like he was listening to someone teach him a knot. We climbed out like old men. On the ridge, the radios woke in a clatter of static. Patel's voice landed hard. "Where the hell did you go? GPS shows you circling like a dog." We told him fog, false trail, interference, no lies, but not truth either. He looked at our faces and didn't press. By evening, they found the husband on a stump by a rusted roller, hands black with something that didn't scrub off. He knew his name, but not his wife. She returned at dusk barefoot down the center line of the road, ankles cross-hatched. "Did you see lights?" I asked faster than I meant. She looked past me and said, calm as a list, "We were expected." For a week, I woke to the sensation of someone beside the bed at 3:10 a.m., patient. I kept the shop bays lit until midnight like brightness could argue a case against whatever steady glow waited in the trees. Alma brought a pie and set it on my bench. "Granddad used to say never carry a lantern into fog," she said. "Glow draws a glow." I told her I was done with the woods until summer was over. She studied me like a receipt and didn't answer. Saturday. That afternoon, a weather front shouldered in and folded the coast under itself. On my phone, Milo sent a photo of 3 white dots over the river mouth. A bad camera making proof. "You see these?" he typed. "Stay home," I wrote back and went anyway. At the turnout, somebody had scratched a second line of X's into the guardrail. Fresh, bright metal shining through paint. Tourists in clean boots peered into a white wall. Past them, the world ended 6 feet from my bumper. I did the stupid thing and brought a light. Headlamp, not lantern, because I'm modern and therefore safe. The lights came the way coworkers come to a whistle. Respectful and in order. They made a path, I walked. The fog thickened. Just when I'd turned back, the light ahead swelled, reassuring. We passed a bald spiral of ground, and I wondered how many circles it takes to sand a name off a man. The camp received me like someone late to a shift. The lights stood where lines should stand. The saw pit, the tally bench, the place for a wash barrel. Lamp oil and old iron. I put my palm on the beam and felt a cold like dentist's numbing rush up my wrist. Not bed sleep. The sleep of settling into a rhythm so deep the day can't find you. If I say yes, I won't have to carry anything alone again. I lifted the lunch pail for the human weight of it. The dent kissed my thumb. The hinge squealed, a small sound that went out and didn't come back. "Corey," Rosa said, though I didn't see her. Her voice came along the air like a gull's cry the ocean carries too far. "You don't have to go where they go." The pressure on my back gentled into suggestion and then regret. I put the pail down. The lights cooled. Not out, nothing as dramatic as that. Just a fraction. I stepped backward, then another, and nothing reached for me. That somehow was harder. A tourist asked if I'd found the overlook. "Not today," I said, and realized my watch was 3 hours wrong. In my truck, the headlamp glowed faintly after I flipped the switch, like a stove element that holds red. I sat until it went dark. Back at the shop, Alma's pie waited on the bench like a dare. I ate with a fork from the toolbox, thinking about being let go by something that wanted me. I wish I could end with a lesson. On some nights, the fog stacks in over the river and the deer step out of the blackberries and stare at nothing, with the careful attention of employees waiting to be told which bay to sweep. The distant horn shudders twice, then twice more, regular as a shift change. On those nights, a soft weight settles between my shoulders. If I stand at the window long enough, the reflection in the glass gets a steady little glow at the corners. Winter white, as if someone has set a lunch pail on the floor and cracked it open so I can find my boots. I get up and stand very still, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th I don't mark. I picture the beam with tally carved into it and the little stone with its neat cuts. Then I sit on the step until the fog thins. If you ever see them, little winter white lanterns in a line, polite as coworkers, don't go. But if you do, if you follow, and it feels like someone lays a hand between your shoulders to guide you, check your watch. If it's 3 hours slow when you come back, tell yourself the battery died. Tell yourself whatever you need. And if, the next time the fog rolls in, you feel it again, the shift calling you by name, leave your lights off and keep counting. 4 is a number a man can live by. 5 is a cut through. I was the night guy at a small marina north of Tahoe City, the sort of job where your hands always smell like pine pitch and diesel. I checked lines, bagged ice, sold worms at hours no one should be awake. Dawn turned the lake from tar to pewter to a coin rubbed thin. and if I kept my head down and the radio low, I could float through a shift without speaking much at all. The rule came from an old-timer named Gene, who kept his lures in an army ammo box and swore his way up the steps. He told it like telling a kid not to lick a battery. If you see the dog, he said, holding a hook with fingers the color of nicotine, ignore it. Walk like you can't be bothered, but if you see it twice on the same trail, don't make plans for the weekend. He said it soft enough that the humming ice chest felt suddenly like a heartbeat. I believed it the way you believe weather talk, possibly true for other people. Then one fog-breathing morning, I took the switchbacks above the marina to get the coffee out of my veins and felt a new weight moving with me in the trees. 10 yards off, something shaggy and black kept pace. Not skulking, not curious, just there. It never looked at me. I didn't look at it. We walked our parallel sentences to the parking lot, where my hands lied to my keys and dropped them twice. In the rear view, I saw nothing but my face cut into pine shadow puzzle pieces. I laughed because people laugh when they almost cry. Word travels on a lake. By noon, a customer was blaming a kayaker's death near Speedboat Beach on a freak gust, and you could feel the room tilt toward hearing more. I said nothing. The dog felt like a tooth you tongue in private. When Gene came by for night crawlers, he took one look at me and said, "Different trail for a while." Practical beats brave 9 times out of 10, so I stuck to the bike path by the highway where cars make their honest noise and nothing follows but exhaust. You start seeing signs when you've been given a rule. A nose smudge low on my back window I didn't remember. Claws that might have been a pine cone dragged by wind. Dock cleats like iron dogs lying down. I told myself that wanting to be haunted is the same as being haunted. I didn't go back to the switchbacks. I didn't glance uphill when I drove by. Wednesday morning, a tourist jackknifed a trailer across the marina entrance. Maya, who runs the place with a braid that means business, tossed me the keys to the red pickup. "Grab the big orange cones from the trailhead," she said. 2 minutes. The trailhead I'd been avoiding leaned up there like a dare. I decided the rule was a contract and I could hold it to the punctuation. It said twice on the same trail. It didn't say 30 feet in. It didn't say parking lot. The upper lot was almost empty. The cones sat in a neat stack by the county map with its bullet holes. I killed the engine, told my heart we were just running an errand, and reached. Somewhere in the needles came a soft thump-thump like a heavy tail testing the air. I didn't turn. I'm not sure why my fingers fumbled one cone so it rolled and kissed the trail. Habit made me step after it, 3 steps, that's all, into the darker dirt where the pines take a bite out of the sky. In the corner of my eye, the shape paced in the trees to my right, patient as a metronome. Second meetings don't sound different. They are just second. I walked backward with the cone, slow, and the world didn't breathe until my door thudded shut. I walked backward, cone in hand like I was carrying nitroglycerin. In the truck I sat very still and listened to the engine idle until my breathing matched it. On the way down I told Maya traffic was a mess and set the cones and didn't explain my face. The world around us made its ordinary racket. Honks, laughter when something finally moved. The noise of people who believe in Saturday like it's a guaranteed delivery. You don't understand time until someone tells you the peace you won't get. Friday hung in my mind like a low branch I'd never reach. I decided to smother chance. I took only main roads. I looked both ways crossing the office. I slept on the floor with the radio on. The callers arguing about baseball and hope. If superstition is a door, caution is a chair under the knob. Thursday, the weather radio barked up gust warnings. Maya said we'd need to double up lines on the rental fleet. I volunteered for the counter. "Fine," she said. "You call the reservations. I'll take the docks with Ben." Relief felt like my skeleton smiling. It didn't last. A little after 4, the office phone rang, and Maya shouted over wind that the green pontoon was drifting, and if it kissed the next slip, we'd be buying someone a boat. I grabbed a vest and went because these are the chores that keep a place like ours from turning into a lawsuit. The dock moved like an old man. The lake slapped. I jumped aboard in the half-second when the hull and pier agreed. I looped the line wrong, fixed it, felt dumb and mortal. "Ease it forward," Maya yelled. The engine coughed and caught. Somewhere a fender thumped. I glanced toward shore. On the far end of the pier, a black dog stood with its head slightly lowered as if reading my name off a tag. It did not move or wag. It didn't need to. I looked away and finished the knot because sometimes there is only the job and the weather, and belief is excess weight. We got the fleet secured. The storm chewed and then let go, as storms sometimes do when they realize no one is impressed. In the office glass that evening, my reflection hung wrong for a blink, like the world had missed a frame. I went back to sleeping on the floor. Around 2, I woke to claws on concrete in the alley by the bait freezer, soft and certain. I lay there and listed other ways people don't make it to Saturday that have nothing to do with ghosts. Clots, wrong-way drivers, the one ladder rung that betrays you. It didn't help. The sound ended the way a sentence ends when someone behind you decides they've said enough. Friday came blue and traitorous. Vacationers walked like winners who'd beaten traffic and were owed joy. Maya told me to go home early. I told her the short version, the rule, the twice. She didn't laugh. My grandmother had an owl rule, she said. If it looked you in the eye from the fence, somebody would be gone by sunrise. She died before I could find out whether it was true. She squeezed my arm. Drive careful anyway. Rules don't mind company. I took the highway because asphalt felt holy. I kept to the limit, hands at 10 and 2 like a student. Between Tahoe City and Kings Beach, the road tightens and the shoulder disappears as if the state ran out of paint. A pickup rode my bumper, then passed on a curve, the driver's hand making a shape that isn't in any sign language I respect. I let every fool be a fool without me. There's a bend where the rock wall leans in. Shade keeps a memory of cold there even in August. As I came around it, a shape stepped from the trees. Not in front of me, but beside me, keeping perfect pace with the truck the way your shadow does when the sun is honest. I didn't look. I knew the nap of its fur from the way the air grew heavy. Headlights bloomed ahead, too bright, drifting, then corrected. In the half-second where decisions are facts wearing masks, I understood something as basic as hunger. The dog wasn't hunting me. It was escorting me, not the killer, just the courtesy. The oncoming car straightened, my rear view filled with road. I had time to think maybe I'd tricked the rule by being small and careful. Then the first rock fell. Rockfall is geology changing its mind. A stone skittered the shoulder. My brain, eager to help, chose to swerve. The rear fishtailed. I turned into it and got a slap of overcorrection for my trouble. Time stretched, then snapped. The guardrail found me like an embrace from an old enemy. Metal screamed. We stopped half on, half off the asphalt. The engine ticked. A moth tried the windshield and failed, tried and failed. A sedan pulled in behind, the driver with a face full of apology. You okay? I looked away for a second. I said I was. It wasn't entirely a lie. We checked the tire. Bent rim, scarred rubber, not fatal. While we crouched there, I looked back down the road. In the shade where the rock starts thinking about falling again, the black dog stood and finally met my eyes. They weren't lanterns or pits. They were just eyes. For an instant, I thought if I whistled, it would come and sleep in the rectangle of sun my living room keeps at noon. Then it turned and walked into the trees with the quiet certainty of a schedule being kept. I made it home. That sentence walks like a thief. I sat on my carpet until the light slid from butter to bruised. Friday night swelled outside. Bars, patios, laughter echoing. I ate crackers and watched the red battery dot on the smoke detector blink every 40 seconds, a tiny faithful heart. Once it failed to blink and I learned how long I could hold my breath. Then it blinked again and I hated the relief. Saturday arrived like a rumor that this time was true. At the marina, Jean looked at me and did the slow nod older men use when they see the answer they expected. Some call it a curse, he said later. Some call it a clock. Me, I call it a courtesy. The worst kind, honest. He paid for worms in soft bills and set them down like an offering. I still take the paved path more often. Some days I take the switchbacks because fear is a bad boss. I haven't seen the dog again. That isn't the same as safe. When I tie a boat line or feel the road tilt, or pause with my hand on a door that might open onto something colder, I remember those eyes that were only eyes. The rule still works its way around town, leaned across counters and told beside truck hoods. If you ask me now, I'd pass it on and add the thing I learned the hard way. If you see it once, ignore it. If you see it twice, make room for the sound a rock makes when it changes its mind. Make room for a black shape that belongs to nobody and everybody. A schedule on 4 legs. Some Fridays are generous. Some aren't. The dog doesn't warn you. It teaches you to listen to the warning you were born with. If you make it to Saturday, count it. Not like money, like mercy. I came back to Calaveras County for a season, or that was the lie I told. The truck needed a transmission, my bank account was a scraped pan, and the only job that didn't require a certificate I didn't have yet was seasonal trail crew. So I cut star thistle and dragged brush with kids who still thought midnight at the quarry was a sacrament. In the afternoons, the foothills went quiet in that July way. Grass the color of old bone, heat humming in fence wire, the long slopes asleep except for the rattling note of cicadas. On my third day, a wiry kid named Rain slapped the cab roof and pointed.
"You seen it yet?"
he said over the saw noise. I had, though I didn't know what to call it. An oak stood alone where ridge spur narrows, pitched a little toward the sky like it had been shoved and decided to stay that way. One main limb wore pale crescents around it. Clean arcs chewed into the bark like something had burned a smile there, then done it again. "Rope burns," Rain said, and he grinned like a boy daring a friend to jump from too high. The story sits in this county the way iron lies in creek beds. The mining towns whispered frontier justice when the sheriff's patience ran longer than the ranchers'. If you say it quick, it sounds tidy. If you look at the branch, you see how long tidy can last. I told myself it was a tree with a bad history and that I was a man with bills. We had flags to pound in and poison oak to lop back so hikers wouldn't come down mean and blistered. Liza, 23, local, a camera always bumping her ribs, worked beside me. Quiet until she wasn't. Nolan the ranger came by for a casual inspection that felt like a sermon. He leaned on our tailgate, thumbs hooked under his belt. "Don't camp under that tree," he said in the voice you use when you tell a kid not to lick a frozen pump handle. "You'll wake with marks you didn't earn." I must have made a face, because he looked past me at the oak and added, soft as a man asking grace, "Not everything on this trail is wildlife." I went home to my mother's house, where the swamp cooler coughs and the linoleum curls at the seams. I lay on the thin mattress listening to the cooler click and told myself it was a belt slipping, not a slow board taking weight. I dreamed a knot the size of a grapefruit, hard as an apple and slick with even use. The next day in the tool shed I heard it again, that dry, conversational groan rope makes when it slides over itself. The rafters were bare 2x6s, nothing to catch. Liza came in with coffee, saw my face, and didn't ask. She just said, "Golden hour on Ridge Spur," and rattled the camera like a badge. We drove up after the crew clocked out. The sun was a low coin. From a distance, the tree looked like a scribble. Up close, it was a piece of work, twisted by wind and whatever men had asked of it. Liza started in on photos. She talks when she's nervous, facts and small-town gossip braided together. "You ever meet Glennie Hargrove?" she asked. "He's got a story. Said his granddad came home with rope burns on his hands and wouldn't touch the good dishes after." She said it like a joke, and watched me like it wasn't. The air thickened by degrees, the way the sky does before thunder even when no clouds are built. The smell shifted too, oak dust and hot grass salted with something faint and sour that made the back of my tongue want to spit. I walked the clearing pretending to check our saw work. Liza crouched to shoot up through the split branches. Then the branch above us made a sound so soft my skin felt it first, weight finding its groove. It's a domestic sound if you've ever hauled a well bucket or swung hay into a loft. It's not frightening by itself. It's frightening there. "We should go," I said, and my voice had the small tremor of a man standing on a rotten rung. We laughed in the truck because you have to bleed off the pressure somewhere. That night I woke with the taste of old pennies in the hallway, dark like a long throat. The quilt under my cheek rasped the way rope does when it rides on bark. In the morning there was a faint, shameful ring on my neck. I told myself it was shirt collar chafe. Nolan saw it and stopped smiling. "Don't let it follow you," he said. "It?" I said, because you try to make a thing foolish by asking the wrong question. "What sticks to a place," he said, "isn't just who swung, it's who clapped. My father wore a deputy's badge here once. He quit when I was 14 and never said why. Sometimes a name, his or another, reached my ears with a tone around it that told me to be quiet. He died in a winter wreck on Parrott's Ferry Road. There are questions you circle for years like a wary dog. A mark on your throat encourages you to walk into them. Liza texted a photo later. A late sun flare cut by a straight, pale line that hung from nothing and stopped where a body would. It wasn't a branch. She'd shot 5 frames. The line drifted a little in each like something the wind couldn't quite decide about. We went back the next evening with a camping stove and the lie that coffee makes places safer. I don't think either of us said out loud what we wanted. Reckoning's a big word until it's just the silence between two people waiting. When the birds quit and the bugs drew their little curtains, the clearing breathed in and didn't breathe out. Liza set the camera to video and pointed it at the scarred limb. The sound came first, the way it had in the tool shed. Then another sound, smaller and harder to place. Cloth rubbed the wrong way, a breath cut short to save it. My throat closed without permission. The screen stuttered and righted itself. The branch didn't move. A pressure came down on my neck, clean and exact, like history measuring me for the part. I stood. It came with me. The whole world made one slow creak. Liza reached for me and I flinched her away because if something meant to lift me, it only needed one. I took a step toward the trail and the weight grudged me an inch. I stepped again and it loosened like a belt after a funeral. The relief felt cheap and borrowed. Enough, I said, at myself at the idea of men in a circle who decide the night belongs to them. We didn't run. We walked like people in a house where something is sleeping and they don't want to wake it. By the time the truck doors shut, the pressure eased. In the mirror, my throat was red and stippled. Liza's jaw trembled. She pretends to be braver than she is and often succeeds, and that makes it worse when she doesn't. On the way down, she said, "You going to tell Nolan?" I said I didn't know, which is another lie. What I did was go home and call my mother. "Your father used to slow down there," she said before I'd finished. "He'd pass the tree like a man in church who isn't sure he belongs." Her voice did a careful thing. People were tired of thieves. The sheriff wouldn't make promises the ranchers wanted kept. There were girls. Men talked. I never asked names. One night he went out and came right back. Slept in the chair. Next morning he made pancakes like he was apologizing to strangers. "Did he?" I started, and the question crowded my throat like rope. She didn't answer. Air moved in the receiver. Sometimes mercy sounds like ignorance, and sometimes it is. Nolan met me by the boat ramp the next day with a manila folder scabbed with paper clips. In it, clippings about fires that weren't called arson and a man found in a stock pond. A church ledger with Tacita Matters in tidy script and, in the margin, a name crossed out so hard the paper tore. "We tell the story like a caution," he said. "But the tree keeps time for the things that didn't make it into the story." That night I slept with the light on. The ring darkened belt wide. I drove up in the thin morning when the light makes bad places look as if they're thinking it over. I took a coil of new hemp rope because I didn't know the right prayer and offerings are older than prayers. At the base of the oak, I tied a simple loop and set it on the ground. "Take this instead," I said, not sure what I meant to trade. The part of me that wanted to be righteous after the fact, or the part that had learned too late how cheap silence is. The air didn't change. Birds worked the edges. The branch wore its old scars like a shrug. I reached up and touched the polished grooves. My fingers fit. That's what I can't forgive. You want a clean ending, I know. The righteous crack of a limb. The ring of names bubbling out of wood in sap-soaked letters. Movies teach endings because they have to stop. Towns don't. 2 nights later, Liza sent a still from the video. She'd lightened it. High in the limb, where the scars deepened, something smooth flashed. Small as a coin, round as a promise. Not bark, not light, hardware. A ring set long ago to make the work easier. The shine had that ugly familiarity of a thing made to last. I sleep better now that I know what I'm sleeping with. Not good. Better. Some mornings, the quilt prints a ghost of a line along my throat and I tell myself it's lint. On late drives, I slow by the tree and then make myself speed up, because reverence is a kind of consent too. If you go, do me a favor and don't call it haunted. Haunted flatters us. It suggests something wants us back. This isn't that. This is a bough that learned a job and kept it when the men who taught it forgot to be ashamed. If you insist on camping there, hang your food and keep your boots in the tent. If you hear a creak, don't look up. Don't give it your face. Some things keep time only when they're seen. All it needs is a little consent. A step off the trail like a man stepping out of a circle he joined because everyone else did. If you wake with a faint ring you didn't earn, don't brag. Wear a scarf and remember, that bough still knows the weight you carry and it is very patient. I work nights for a tow company that keeps a rust-orange wrecker crawling up and down Angela's Crest like a slow, ugly fish. Nights taste like diner coffee and burned brake pads, and every sound is louder because the world's asleep, and you aren't. If a story wants to be told in Pasadena, it waits for midnight and a curve. You learn the weather by smell. Eucalyptus, hot dust, a wet slip of fog. You learn the names the cops use and the names they won't put in a report. And you learn the places people dare each other to go because fear sounds brave if you put a dare in front of it. The first time I heard about the girl, I was dragging a Civic off the low wall near the turnout. A kid in a Letterman jacket kept saying he didn't touch the brakes, like, touching the brakes at the wrong time is a sin. She was in the road, he kept repeating. White dress like prom. She looked at me like I should remember something, and then he mimed the swerve as if that motion could still help. His friends nodded too hard, trying to convince each other as much as me. Later, at the donut shop that never locks its door, I heard the dare explained neat. Drive to Inspiration Point after midnight, park by the old stone guardrail, leave the headlights on, and if you see the prom girl, don't stop. Nobody agreed on the year 80s, 90s, maybe older because of the sleeves, but everyone agreed she had glass eyes. Like windows with the blinds pulled down. You stock those stories the way you stock fuses. Things you might need but hope you don't. 2 nights later, I got a call for a dead minivan past the turnout. A dad and 2 teenagers riding the last of an alternator. Fog rolled in and made halos around my work lights. Their hazards pulsed slow. The girl stared past me toward the trailhead. "She's late," she said, then flinched at her own voice like someone else had used it. The boy's phone spoke from his pocket in a tinny whisper. "We're here. We're here." No call showed on the screen. The dad did that calm father thing. Quiet voice. Busy hands, and asked if I could tow them down ourselves instead of waiting on a second truck. I swept my beam across the posts and the brush and saw a seam in the fog. Not a person exactly. More like the fog had folded wrong and someone was standing in the crease. The girl's hand found my sleeve and held there, not tugging, just anchoring. "We should go," she said, and it sounded like a sentence repeating from a dream you half remember. We rode down in first gear, wipers squeaking, the teenagers small and stiff against the vinyl. "You believe the stories?" the girl asked finally. I told her I believed in bad visibility, loose gravel, bald tires, and kids daring each other to do what they already want. That satisfied no one, least of all me. The next afternoon, there was a new shrine at the turnout. Grocery store mums, 2 votive candles puddled white, a photo zip-tied to the fence. Wind up there is mean. It takes what you set down. The candles were still soft as if fingers had pressed them. I pulled over anyway, hazards washing the rock orange, and looked. The photo showed a girl with the kind of smile that makes parents cry at graduations. Someone had written, "Always home before curfew" on the back in thick marker. I went to the truck to leave a note for the family, and in the glove box, my fingers closed on something softer than paper and colder than the air. A corsage. The petals were browned like burned sugar. The ribbon was stiff with old hairspray. It smelled faintly of baby powder and damp carpet. I hadn't put it there. I told myself someone had, and that was somehow better. I told Torres about the shrine, but not about the corsage. He's CHP on nights up there. A big man who laughs in the right places so you say more than you meant to. We stood by the turnout while the city burned gold under the smog. "Kids are doing that dare again," he said. Parents calling. One mom swears a girl in a dress keeps showing up in her son's photos. She sends them, and now my inbox looks haunted by bad flash. He tapped the stone post. "You know they pulled a car from the fire road down there years back? People call it unused, but the brush tells you different if you look." His mouth went thin. Teen couple. Night after a dance. You know the rest. I wanted to ask who kept the corsage from that wreck, but Torres had the look you get when a memory sits wrong in your throat. I didn't tell him that every time my radio burped static lately, I heard a girl's voice beneath it. Too clean and flat, like a pre-recorded helpline. "Can you take me home?" The words came without any mountain air in them, as if they had been sealed somewhere and were still stale. I threw the corsage away in the shop dumpster and found it back on my dash the next morning, leaving a powdery ring like it had sat there a long time. I laughed, threw it out again, and locked the truck. That night it was in my glove box. The night I stopped, I didn't mean to. The road had that empty before dawn feeling. An hour when even coyotes get bored of themselves. I'd been awake too long. The fog was thick enough that my high beams only painted a wall. She stood at the trailhead, a pale tilt in the gray, and I saw her the way a camera catches motion. One frame empty, the next frame not. The dress wasn't movie blood, just old stains that had drowned and dried more than once. One arm hugged her ribs as if something there hurt. She tilted her head like she was listening to traffic that wasn't coming. "Can you take me home?" she asked. The mouth moved right. The sound arrived a beat late. The air around her smelled like rain on hot pavement and a closet that's been shut a decade. My door groaned. Gravel popped under my boots. "Where's home?" I asked, because you test a vision the way you test a wire. Touch quick and pull back. Her chin turned toward the brush, and in the space her outline made, I saw the curving start of the old fire road, the one that pretends it doesn't exist. My hand reached into the cab and picked up the corsage. It looked inevitable in my palm, like a key you thought you'd lost. "Is this yours?" I said. She didn't take it. She breathed in little snagged sips, and the sound slipped into the rhythm of my truck's idle like it belonged there. Down the grade, a pair of headlights carved the fog. The driver saw me, then saw beyond me. His mouth opened. Brakes turned his courage into a squeal. The car drifted toward the stone posts and corrected too late. The mirror ticking rock. "Please," she said. This time the word and the mouth matched. I opened the passenger door. The cab light didn't come on. Nothing sat in the seat. The weight settled anyway, low and cold, pulling the belt across my chest until it clicked like a promise. My dash clock blinked 3:12 twice and then forgot what numbers were. I didn't go over the edge. We went in. The brush closed over the hood like curtains in a sick room. Gravel whispered under the tires, and then there wasn't gravel. Just a slow, grinding argument with the bones of a road. I felt the bite of cables that weren't there. The frame shuddering as if a hand was remembering how it fit. I kept both hands on the wheel, and still I was a passenger in my own truck. The radio hissed water over stones, and the voice returned, closer now. "Can you take me home? Can you take me?" When the fog let go, I was on the main road, pointed downhill. The city spread out like costume jewelry that can't buy you anything real. The clock said 4:19. I pulled into the first turnout and vomited into the brush, because sometimes your body decides for you. The passenger seat was empty. The corsage was gone. On my shoulder, a bruise bloomed in the shape of a belt buckle. I drove home with the radio off. The quiet felt like a trick. 2 days later, there was another shrine. New photo, same kind of grin, different handwriting. He stopped. Torres didn't wave me over that afternoon. He had flares out and a tarp he didn't want to lift. A car lay on its side with wheels turning tenderly, like it still believed in momentum. "You don't need to see this," he said. The boy from the photos must have turned around to come back. He looked at me as if he'd heard my radio too. I put in for a transfer and told people it was my back. Nights still find me though. Wind scrapes the windows and I taste metal, smell old flowers, hear a voice with all the mountain air pressed out of it. "Can you take me home?" In my first week of day shift, an envelope slid under my door with no return address. Inside was a parking ticket with my plate, written at 3:13 the night I went, where the map says there's nothing. Location, Fire Road 12, closed. The signature was a loop and a line that made no name at all. People still drive up after midnight. I hear them when sleep won't stick, tires chattering. Laughter that sounds brave until it doesn't. They pose by the old stone posts and take pictures with the flash too close, and sometimes the photos catch a smear that wasn't there when they blinked. If you go, and you will because warnings call us by name, remember this: she doesn't make you stop. That part is on you. She only tilts her head like she's listening for a better future coming from somewhere behind you. And long after you've gone home and locked the door and told yourself it was fog and nerves, you'll feel a belt tighten across your chest, and you'll hear a girl asking, very politely and just a little late, if you can take her there. They sent me to walk it after the winter blowdowns because I grew up here and because I don't spook easy. That was the joke at Public Works: Nate doesn't spook. I've cut windfall off 299 at 3 a.m. with rain bouncing off the bar. I know the difference between a fox bark and a drunk yelling in the dark. So when the county map flagged an old spur, Cart 7, abandoned since the 80s, I signed out a ranger in a tent and told the clerk I'd be back in the morning. The map showed a thin scar curling along second-growth redwood, past a collapsed trestle and a rusted donkey engine. In daylight, the road still wears its history. Twin ruts scalloped with fern, iron rim grooves turned to green gutters, stumps big as cottages. Under everything is the quiet of big trees doing the slow math of centuries. I parked where asphalt gave up to gravel, shouldered my pack, and hiked until the sun slid behind the ridge. Humboldt does dusk in layers, the color leaving the trunks one notch at a time. The air smelled of wet duff and old iron. When I passed the boiler, just a crimped dome slumped in Salal, I heard it. One clean ping of metal on metal, the far-off ring of an axe test. I told myself it was memory. My grandfather used to strike the bit after sharpening and smile when it sang. Up the slope, half hidden in fir needles, stood a little shrine, weather-grayed crosses, a mason jar with agates, a photograph melted to a pale oval. This county collects roadside grief the way trees collect fog. I boiled water, made coffee too dark, and ate a sandwich the way you do in fire camp. Do the simple things, prove the world is ordinary, the forest argued. The ring came again, then a grind. Not a chainsaw's scream, a two-man saw's breath. Shh, 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 long draws, a pause in the bite. The scream didn't come from where I put the men, it came from the ground. It rose through soil and duff with a pitch that made the tent poles vibrate. Then the forest did that thing I've only heard a few times. Everything held its breath. It lasted long enough for the coffee to go cold in my hand. I'm checking, I told the air, because talking turns fear into something you can carry. The beam carved tunnels through fog. The ruts shone with puddles that held a copy of the sky. Around the boiler, the stumps stood like tables in a ruined dining room, sawed flat a century ago. On one, my light found something that should have been gone. A black-red shine and a crescent smear. Blood throws color back to light. Pitch does too. I stuck a finger in because you always want an answer you can wash off. My finger came away sticky and dark, and the smell ran sweet-sour in a way that turns the stomach. Not sap, not rust. Something meat wrong. Someone behind me counted in a gravel whisper. 246 Hall. I spun. The light caught only mist and trunks. The numbers stumbled. 810 Tai 2 Hall. You want a test of nerves? Stand in fog while a stranger you can't see forgets how numbers work. You okay out there? I said, habit stronger than sense. The counting stopped like I'd insulted it. The saw came back. Shh, shh, shh. The rhythm made a nest in my ribs. I put my back to the boiler because it was the only thing on that slope I understood. In the moss, I found ovals set far apart. Prints, I told myself, elk. But too clean, too round, like steel shoes had passed and the ground hadn't forgiven yet. The next cry wasn't a scream. It was a man's breath breaking. I went because that sound moves a body whether it wants to or not. I grabbed the first aid kit and followed the ruts past the shrine and down a scar where skids once dragged trunks toward a trestle that now rotted into the ravine. The smell changed first. The air took on sweetness that sat wrong. Candy in a glove box, clinic rubber, old rot. The stump with the smear waited like a table set for the wrong dinner. Close up, the top was scarred in sets of 4 crescents, as if a hand had tried to grip while the rest of the arm went somewhere it didn't want to. There was hair in one seam, dark as roots. Silence turned heavy, not absence but pressure. Somewhere beyond the beam something shifted its feet. It was the minute before a tree falls and you can't tell where. Every lesson redwoods taught my bones shouted, "Get down." I went flat, cheek to duff, mouth full of tannin and grit. What moved over me wasn't wind. It was breath, many chests working. The synchronized breathing of men under a load. The crew passed without bodies to carry their names. A pop like a tendon breaking snapped the valley open. The sound of fiber tearing followed, loud enough that my chest tried to crawl backward without me. The invisible trunk scythed the place where my head had been. Ferns laid themselves down as if they'd practiced. The trestle remnants groaned. Impact thudded the soil and went up the hill in steps. I saw the fall with my eyes shut. A 60-year-old collapse replayed, the same mistake with the same timing, eternity with a punch clock. Time got thin after that. When I crawled back to the tent, my hands shook the way they do after chainsaw work when you pretend they aren't. I called Tessa because she is the person I call when I've already made up my mind to lie, and I want someone to stop me. We used to be engaged. We're friends now in that practical Humboldt way, all history, little ceremony. You camped alone on Cart 7, she said. Nate, why do you try the world like this? The guy who doesn't spook, I said, hating how thin it sounded. I told her about the counting, the knot blood, the way the ground breathed. Do the ordinary, she said. Boil water. Brush your teeth. Make a second cup you won't drink. Tomorrow tell someone so it doesn't live just in your skull. For who? I asked. Ghosts? For you, she said. So you clock out. A wind shook drops off a limb and stitched them across the fly. I made the second cup. I burned my tongue. I pretended the next sharp sound was a coyote. It wasn't. It was a sob cut short by work. I didn't sleep so much as lose minutes waking with the toothbrush in my hand, then with dirt under my nails and a taste of pitch, as if I'd been chewing sap. At first blue I packed. I didn't look back. I counted to keep pace with the bog bridges, 2, 4, 6, so the road wouldn't get to choose the numbers. At the truck I wrote the part that could be written. Flagged a leaner. Marked a small slide. Noted obsolete boiler. Hazard to public curiosity. There is no checkbox for history replaying itself at volume. On the drive out, the county radio caught a call I wasn't on, and a voice answered copy. In the same flat way the counting voice said haul. My hand made a fist on the wheel. By Thursday, we were back with a crew to clear culverts before the next storm. Sal laughs like he's making room for other men to laugh. Owen whittles during lunch. Jerry treats every saw like it could get mean if you don't greet it right. They don't spook easy either, but each tipped his hard hat at the shrine without talking about it. Work is its own weather. We dug out needles and clay, flagged a leaning fir, tamped a soft spot with shovels. The donkey engine took sun like a sleeping dog. Someone said his granddad had run one, and the way he said it made the iron feel alive. On the trestle fill, Owen's boot sank to the ankle and jerked free with a hollow sound. He swore, then found a grin because that's how crews keep the air useful. Even so, on the way out, I hung back and told them I needed one more flag. I went to the stump. Heat came up through the cut when I set my palm there. Not sunshine pulse. I counted without meaning to. 2, 4, 6, haul. The numbers fit my breath like they'd been waiting for a chest to borrow. I snatched my hand away and the throb went into the ground. The grind finds me now while I'm brushing my teeth. Sometimes when a traffic light changes in rain and tires hiss, the rhythm slides into the sound without asking and I have to stand there until it passes. Tessa says I should move inland, as if geography could outwalk a road that lives in work, as if asphalt is anything but dressed up dirt. 3 Fridays later I went back alone like a fool to prove the stain was gone. It hadn't rained. It hadn't needed to. The crescent of black red shone as if the wood had learned thrift. I pressed a finger to it the way a man presses a bruise to see if the pain still belongs to him. When I lifted my hand, there were 4 tiny arcs set into the pad, the memory of a grip. I wiped my finger on my jeans. The mark stayed until I slept. In the morning, there was black under my nails again. Not dirt, not sap. Something older. Here is what I know in my bones now. Time doesn't put anything down. It only gets better at carrying it. Somewhere out on cart 7, men who were timed and paid by the inch still breathe together because that's what bodies do when work is bigger than any one of them. Somewhere the road keeps its count and waits for a chest willing to match it. I still do the simple things. I boil water. I make the second cup. I flag the leaners and mark the slides. But some nights, in the warm noise of my house, I hear a quiet voice say, "Move if I hold my own breath." The floorboards answer, "Shh, shh, shh," and under my nails, even after I scrub, there's a thin line of black that won't wash away, like the road reached in and left me a piece of its job to finish. I don't know how long I stood. I do know that I nearly fell when a light hit me from the side and made a hard shadow. Reyes had a flashlight and the look of a man who had tried to decide whether to wait or go in after me, and chosen against his better judgment. He'd salted his own tongue, I saw. His lips were white at the corners. He beckoned with 2 fingers. The gesture made the hands on my back flare to a shove. It wasn't violent. It was offended. The breath pushed inside my head and my eyes watered. Then Ray threw a handful of salt across my chest and mouth like he was baptizing me the emergency way. The breath went thin, like the last hiss from a punctured tire. We backed toward the pines, and when my heel touched needles, I heard my heartbeat for the first time in I don't know how long. It sounded enormous. It sounded like a stranger was living in my ribs and wanted out. In the truck, Reyes wiped my face with a rag that smelled like motor oil. "You're done," he said. "No more curiosity." I nodded. He kept looking at the meadow like it might get up and walk. Then he said almost gently, "It knows you now." I laughed too loudly and asked him what the hell that meant. "Some places are like dogs," he said. "They take a liking. They follow you home." For a while after, I believed I'd gotten away with it. The nosebleeds stopped. Sound lived where it should. The only pressure I felt was from overdue bills and a tooth I needed to fix. I took calls, towed tourists, argued with dispatch about gas vouchers. And then little pockets of quiet began to find me. In the freezer aisle at the Vaughn's, by the soda machine at the garage, in my bedroom around 2 in the morning, with the fan still turning and refusing to be heard for 3 breaths. That was the number 3. On the 3rd breath, it would fill my skull like a tide. On the fourth, it would fade, leaving behind a chill where my thoughts lived. I stopped sleeping right. When I did, I dreamed of standing in my childhood kitchen while my mother hummed and the window shook in a wind you couldn't hear. I'd wake with the taste of pine and something like old blood in my mouth. I tried to tell myself what Reyes told me in his own way. It isn't haunted. It's holy. That worked for a day at a time. Then I got a call from dispatch. Family stranded near mile marker 60-something, flat tire, kids in the car. I stared at the address so long it blurred. I almost let it roll to someone else. Almost. On the shoulder, I found a sedan canted in a way that made the father's jaw work. The little girl had her hands over her ears. The boy just looked at me with wide eyes like he recognized something and didn't like it. I could feel it before I stood. The pocket of cool, the damped air. The meadow breathed across the highway like someone sleeping with the door open. I changed the tire with the speed of a practiced lie. I told them to follow me down. As I climbed into the cab, I saw in the passenger seat an impression like someone had been there a long time and had just risen to stretch. I pulled into gear. For a second, I didn't move. The meadow lay to my left, a coin in the grass, moon cold. The breath came, counted 1, 2, 3. My ears filled and emptied like a wave tugging shells. From somewhere under my thoughts came a sentence that didn't feel like mine and fit me perfectly. A circle isn't only a boundary. It's a way home. I turned the wheel a few degrees toward the left. Not enough to leave the shoulder, just enough so the truck was pointed a little more at the opening in the trees. I stared until my eyes watered. Then I straightened the wheel, signaled, and rolled us back toward the city and its forgiving noise. In the mirror, the meadow stayed still, which was somehow worse than if it had moved. Back in town, I parked the truck and sat for a while with my hands on the wheel. I could feel deep in the meat of me something slow and patient, taking my measure the way carpenters hold a level and wait for the bubble to settle. I told myself I wouldn't go back up there again. I meant it when I said it. Every night since, somewhere a little quiet finds me and sets itself around my head like a crown. It lasts 3 breaths, long enough to remember the push. Long enough to hear the soft rasp of foreign lungs inside my skull. Long enough to know that a circle is patient. If it can't bring you to the center, it will bring the center to you. Most of my nights start with a damp thermos, 2 stale gas station donuts, and the long climb up the Angeles crest with the tow truck humming like a big electric bee. Folks picture the mountains as grand and wild. I mostly see them as broken belts and overheated radiators. I work nights because people do dumb things after dark. Miss a curve, cut a sidewall on rock, don't check coolant. I don't mind it. The sky feels close up there. The city lights smeared behind your shoulder like someone spilled glitter and didn't bother to sweep. And on a good night, the only voices I hear are dispatch and the coyotes needling each other down in the chaparral. The first time I heard about the meadow, I was rolling past mile marker 60-something with a couple of kids in the cab, and their dad sweating through a polo shirt in the passenger seat. Their minivan had died like it was relieved to be done. The little boy kept smacking his hand to his ear and saying it felt full. The girl stared out the window and said, "Dad, listen." The bug stopped. The way she said it made me check, and sure enough, the usual electric hum of summer, crickets, cicadas, fell off a cliff. We'd driven into a patch of quiet like a pocket of cold water in a warm lake. The boy started to cry. I told him it was just the climb messing with his head. A pressure thing, like when planes land. That was before I knew Reyes did. Everyone up here knows Reyes. Forest Service uniform gone shiny at the seams, mustache, shoulders like he still chops his own wood because he trusts steel more than gas. He was waiting at the turnout when I set the van down. He leaned in my window and sniffed, like you might smell a freezer burn in the air. "Don't linger," he said, not to me so much as to the air. The dad asked what he meant. Reyes pointed with his chin at the open grass beyond the pines. They call it the silent meadow. Kids on campouts, hikers. No insects in there, no birds. If you look, even the grass is different. Keep to the road. On the way back down, the quiet rode with me longer than it should have. My radio crackled like someone rubbing a balloon. The clock on the dash stuttered at 1:11 and then thought better of it and clicked forward. Halfway to La Cañada, the hum came back. Cicadas sawing at the dark. The easy hiss of wind through needles. Relief ballooned in my chest. It popped when dispatch came on to tell me a Boy Scout troop had called from up near the same mile marker. 2 boys with nosebleeds. One kid said it felt like something breathed inside his head. You learn which calls are serious by the voice you have to use. This one got my church voice. I radioed I was close and swung the wheel hard enough to slosh coffee on my jeans. When I got there, Reyes had a camp lantern going but held it low like lifting it would be a dare. The boys looked like they'd been pulled out of a pool and forgotten to breathe. Blood threaded from their nostrils into the dirt and made rusted blossoms. The scoutmaster had that bright, tight look adults get when they have to pretend in front of kids. "We just lay down," one boy said, hands on his temples. I was listening to the nothing and then I felt somebody push me. I didn't fall. It just pushed. We bundled them into my truck, the kids quiet, the scoutmaster busy apologizing to Reyes for not checking maps, like the meadow could be avoided by paperwork. As we pulled away, my rear view caught Reyes standing exactly at the line where the pine needles stopped and the grass started. He was tilted forward a touch, like someone had put a hand between his shoulder blades. I tried not to think about it. Night stacked, tires blown, dead batteries. People who look into your eyes too long because fear makes them stare. The meadow became a story to tell customers to keep them from checking their phones. There's a place up here where sound goes to die. They'd laugh the way you laugh at a snake behind glass. It worked until I let it get personal. Until I drove back up in the daylight with an idea like a jagged tooth I'd tongued too long, that I could prove myself braver than the quiet. Reyes caught me as I pulled into the turnout. "Don't," he said. "No hello, no small talk. You think it's about courage because you don't know the right size for things." He can sound rude when he tries to save you. I told him I just wanted to look. "You can look from here," he said, and then, as if it embarrassed him to be helpful, added, "Bring salt." I laughed and said, "What, like a steak?" He didn't laugh. "It's an old trick. You'll see." It was noon and still the meadow looked like a piece of theater. The way the grass fell to an exact lull and the pines ringed it like an audience that wouldn't clap yet. I stepped to the edge with a pocket shaker of road salt pilfered from the garage in town like an idiot. The air felt cool. Not cold, cool like a supermarket dairy aisle. My boots hissed in the dry needles. The instant my toe brushed grass, something took the sound out of my footfalls. They still shook my bones, but they made no noise. It wasn't absence. It was pressure. The silence pressed into my ears and mouth like a gloved hand. I took 3 more steps. The world outside the ring bent. You don't think about how many noises live in you. The creak of vertebrae, spit clicking, your breath until the world takes them. I could see the pines move in a wind I could no longer hear. I could see a hawk glide, cut sideways, and vanish with the clean fold of a card trick. I couldn't hear the hawk. My brain kept reaching for sound like a hand searching for a rail in the dark and finding air. At step 4, I felt a palm settle between my shoulders. It was gentle, a lifeguard's hand. It pushed in a steady way that told a story. This way, this way, this way. I froze. The force increased like a tension. I remembered Reyes and the salt, and embarrassed, I reached back and flicked a pinch behind me. I didn't hear it hit, but I felt something recoil like a horse flinching from a fly. The pressure eased. I took a breath I could see and not hear, and then a second hand, lighter, colder, found my lower back. The push returned, patient, like a parent guiding a child through a doorway he doesn't want to go through but will. I threw the salt in a line, the way you draw a line in a joke about vampires. The push stopped. I took a step backward and felt, this is the part I fight saying even now, air moving inside my head. Not in my ears. Behind them, like the inside of my skull had lungs. The breath was not mine. It was careful, curious. The way you blow on the surface of hot soup to cool a spot that is yours alone. I stumbled back to the needles and sound slapped me. Birds, wind. A fly whining. Reyes appeared out of the trees cradling a first aid kit, like a baby he didn't entirely want. "You brought salt," I said. He nodded, jaw tight. "I told you to bring salt." I tried to make a joke and failed. He said, "It's not for it. It's for you. Something about the taste in your mouth helps your head remember where it ends." We both stood and looked. The meadow lay innocent as a postcard. He said the first story he heard was from an old logger who swore the place was used for something awful long before the road. That ghosts don't make silence. Sacred things do. "Then why the hands?" I asked. "Why the bleeding?" Reyes shrugged like a man too tired to believe one story or too smart to choose. Maybe it's a boundary. Maybe it's an invitation with rules. Maybe it's a test that keeps grading you after the bell. That night I told myself not to go back and then found myself on the highway. Windows down, radio off, thermos forgotten on the counter at home. The turnout glowed a little under the moon. The grass looked pale, almost blue. I parked with my wheels straight, so if I had to leave fast, I wouldn't have to think about geometry. I felt ridiculous and brave, which is a dangerous twosome. I stepped into the meadow with no salt and a head full of other people's stories. It took the sounds again, and this time it took something else. The little controlling voice you use to narrate yourself. The one that says, turn left, say hello, stand up now. It wasn't gone. It had company. The breath inside my skull came back. It was faster now, excited, like a dog that knows you've brought the leash. It blew once, twice, and on the second breath I felt a trickle of warmth on my upper lip. I reached, expecting snot, and my fingers came away slick. Nosebleed. I tasted metal and something not quite salt, and the thought arrived in my head that I should step to the center. It wasn't a thought exactly. It didn't start from the inside and walk to the edge of me. It came from the edge inward. Step to the center. There is a right spot in any circle, a place where a person stands and every line of force meets them fair. The hands were on me again, one between the shoulder blades, one at the lower back, and I let them move me the way you let a current carry you when you're tired and the shore is simple. The center was revealed by a difference in the grass. Not brown, not dead. Just arranged somehow, as if lighter feet had laid there and the stems remembered. I stood there. The breath in my skull steadied. For a moment I thought I heard whispers, but not in my ears, under the words of my own thoughts, like a radio station landing halfway between two cities. I could taste pine and old dust the way you taste dust in a house that's been closed too long. The breath leaned close and a picture flickered across whatever you'd call the screen behind the eyes. My mother at our old kitchen sink, humming Blue Moon with a dish towel thrown over her shoulder. I hadn't thought of that in years. The breath seemed to taste it. I used to think the desert couldn't hide anything. Out here you can see for miles. Rock like broken knuckles, Joshua trees with their awkward raised arms, and a sky that looks too big for people. That's what I told my brother Nate the last night I rode shotgun on his patrol. I sold swamp coolers and tried not to hate July. Full moon, he said, turning off the highway toward Quail Springs. Helps folks find the wrong places. Thought that's what maps were for, I said, and he smiled without showing teeth. The service road was flower soft. Then I saw them. Bare footprints just off the tire ruts, toes splayed like they were trying to hold on. They curled in a wide circle that tightened and tightened until it simply stopped. No final step, no heel. The center was brushed clean like a table someone wiped with the flat of their hand. Wind, Nate said, but he didn't sound sure. We stood in it anyway, the kind of quiet that makes you feel loud just for breathing. You hear about the cairn? He asked. Crew followed prints 2 miles last month. Spiral ended at a stack of stones. No footprints away from it. You save that detail for now? I said, and we both looked at the center. We took photos and moved on. Rangers don't get to stay fascinated. There are teenagers to send home, tourists to find before night does. He dropped me at my duplex around 2. You see any of those near the house? He said. Don't chase them. You think I'm stupid? I think you'll want to, he said, and drove off. 2 days later, Nate didn't come home. They found his truck at Quail Springs with the dust around it churned to paste. Engine off, doors locked, keys in the cup holder. His hat lay on the passenger seat like he'd set it aside to think. There were faint half-moons of toes at the outer edge of the churn, as if someone had started a spiral and grown impatient. I walked 30 feet out, and there they were again. Bare feet in the powder. Circling wide, circling again, tightening. Always turning left. For a while another set, Nate's boots, kept close, then staggered and vanished. The spiral braided inward until we hit a low cairn. 3 rings of hand-stacked stone with a dark, river-smooth rock sitting like a coin on top. No exit print. Just a pressed crescent on the dark stone. The hint of a heel and nothing else. Everyone had a sentence to put around it. Coyotes. A prank. He left, someone said, helpless. Search and rescue grid walked. A helicopter pounded the air and the desert frowned the way it does when people try to make it care. After a week, there was a folder with my brother's name on it, and the chief ranger's careful voice on the phone. Mom left casseroles with notes in her neat script. Heat at 3:50. Neighbors hugged me in the cereal aisle. The prints started showing up in town. First outside the diner. Neat arcs in the powder by the newspaper box, circling, stalling, circling again. Then by the hardware store. where the owner swept each dawn and found a small smooth center by noon. "Kids," he said, then looked at the bare toes and didn't say anything else. At the gas station, a spiral half-formed beneath the ice machine finished itself. I told myself it was breeze in low places, and then I stopped telling myself anything. Nights were loud with quiet. The swamp cooler coughed in a rhythm that made a shape I could not unsee. Around and in, around and in. I dreamed of walking barefoot across my kitchen floor and waking with grit stuck to my heel. I moved my bed away from the window and tucked the sheet under like a hotel, as if that could keep something from sitting on the edge and watching. On the 4th week, I drove out to the park because not going had become its own kind of chasing. I took Nate's old bandana from Mom's laundry room and knotted it under my chin. It smelled like his shampoo and sun-baked cotton. The cairn at Quail Springs had been dismantled by whoever writes reports, but the place remembered. There's a kind of hush you can stand in. You feel it press on the parts of you that decide. "Hey, big brother," I said, because names are ropes. "I'm here." A small change went through the light like a breath pulled and held. Then 2 prints appeared in the dust at my feet. Not there, and then there if you were patient enough to see it. Bare. One facing me, one facing away. They drew me out in a wide circle. I kept to the untouched dust just outside the line like that would matter, and still the pull found my ankles. The 2nd ring crossed the 1st. The 3rd crossed them both. I told myself I'd walk 1 more ring and quit. By the 4th, I wasn't sure which direction I'd come from. A Joshua tree lifted its arms and the shadow moved wrong. "Nate?" I said. My voice came back a half beat ahead of me, faint but exact, as if I'd already said it there a moment earlier. I stopped and the echo stopped where my next step would have gone. Sweat slicked my palms. The 5th ring was tight enough that my boots almost stepped in the same print. Toe into heel, heel into toe, like dancing with someone who won't let you lead. At the center was a smooth circle of dust the size of a dinner plate. It was so clean it looked wet. I wanted to put my foot there. The wanting was physical. It bent my knees. You think you're strong until you meet the kind of desire that feels like gravity. The air felt stretched and soundless. Every ring around me held the ghost of what I'd already said. A low murmur of my own voice from a minute ago. 2 minutes. 5. Turning with me in narrower circles. You can break a spell with a wrong step. That's a thing we told each other as kids when we spun in the living room and tried not to fall into the coffee table. I took a step backward, heel first, outside the groove the walk wanted. The air snapped without noise. The heat reasserted itself. A jay cursed like it had been holding its breath. The prints ahead softened as if they'd been exhaled. I was left with the foolish feeling you get when you interrupt a game you don't understand. I ran. Not far, just to the truck. I sat with my hands on the wheel until my heart slowed. I told the chief ranger I'd gone out and done a stupid thing. He nodded like men do when they can't scold grief into sense. After that, I stayed off sand and out of the park. I put a rug by the bed like an island. It collected a little drift of powder each night that moved when I wasn't looking. I swept, it came back. I told myself it was the wind walking. Last night I went for milk at the quick stop because milk is what people buy when they intend to pretend they're fine. Under the pole light, moths battered the white. Beside the dumpster, the dust had started a slow, polite spiral, so faint it could have been imagination, except it wasn't mine. A kid in a hoodie stood there with his hands shoved in his pockets and said without looking at me, "You see that? What do you think it is?" I asked. "A place people stand in their heads," he said. "Then they step into it and don't need feet anymore." We stared until the clerk banged the door open and yelled at the kid to move along, and the kid moved, and the dust kept turning by itself. I went home with milk and, because I'm not as strong as I pretend, a mesh bag of smooth aquarium stones. I stacked them on my kitchen table into a tender little cairn, palm high. On the top stone, I pressed my thumb until the sweat left a print. I did it anyway. People who are afraid make shrines out of ordinary things. You want an ending. So do I. A confession, a body, a map with red ink. Instead, I have this. Every time I open the front door, a thin line of dust along the baseboard curves toward the table and tightens. Almost nothing. A suggestion. Every time I sweep, it resumes. The pull is patient. It has all the time. Sometimes in that prickle before sleep, I hear Nate say my name from the hallway. Sometimes I nearly say, "Hang on," and stand. I don't know if it's him, or the place that liked him, or just my voice coming home late to itself. I've been sitting very still at the kitchen table tonight, watching the dust lean toward the stone as if drawn by breath. The swamp cooler ticks. The bandana is folded beside the milk like a flag. If I go, it won't be dramatic. I won't drive to the park or write a note. It'll be one step barefoot, because shoes feel wrong in certain moments. The hall is narrow. The spiral will have been there a long time, waiting in the powder you don't see until you move something out of the way. Maybe the center is the size of a plate. Maybe it's smaller. Maybe the last mark a person leaves is a smudge on a rock and an absence that the wind keeps smoothing with the softest hand it has. If I don't go, the dust will keep circling. The town will talk less than not at all. The ranger trucks will idle at Quail Springs and someone will stack the stones again. Someone will say wind. Someone will say kids. And at night, under that big sky that looks like it was made to see, there will be these careful barefoot marks, widening and narrowing, and a center no one can put a boot in without wanting to disappear. I'm trying not to stand. The wind has picked up. It scrapes along the stucco like a shoe dragging when you're tired. The stones on the table make a small, serious shadow. I'm going to sit here and drink my milk and look at the little cairn and tell myself I'll still be here in the morning. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll be the smooth place. Either way, if you ever find a spiral that ends in a neat, clean nothing, please don't step in it to see. The desert doesn't hide things. It teaches you how to look away. I was the sort of guy who straightened other people's stakes at campgrounds. Not to be nosy, just because a right tent feels like respect. Taut fabric, clean angles, the door aimed at something you can see at 2 a.m. I liked things square. It made the night friendlier, like you'd shaken hands with the dark and agreed on terms. On Thursdays, I closed the gear shop on Ojai Avenue and drove the Forester into Los Padres with coffee that went stale by the first saddle. I brought repairs home, a zipper here, a sleeve there, and on Fridays I'd field test them. That's how I took the green two-person that started this. No brand I recognized, logo sun-bleached to a ghost. I'd sewn new corner webbing and bullied a bent vestibule pole straight. Looked fine under the shop lights. I wanted to be sure. Elena kissed my cheek and said, "If you don't text by noon, I'm calling Carnes." Carnes runs search and rescue. In a town like ours, names are phone numbers. I promised noon and went. I picked a shoulder above Rose Valley where an old fire road sighs into pines. Not an official site, just a ring of blackened stones and ground pressed flat by strangers needing the same shape of rest. Evening gave the chaparral that metallic taste it gets when heat lets go. I set the tent with the door facing the faint line of trail, habit, superstition, sense, and watched the ridge go purple. The first wrong thing was small enough to laugh at. When I killed the headlamp, the door didn't face the trail anymore. It canted toward a thicket of manzanita, red limbs polished like knobs. I slid back out to tug a peg. Everything looked right, only crooked, like a picture frame your fingertip can't fix. Sometime after midnight, a zipper lifted in the trees. Not mine. A tidy sound, slow, stopping when I held my breath. The forest gathered itself around the absence. Wind combing needles, an owl reconsidering its branch. I slept because fear without a name is only nervousness. Morning showed the tent wasn't where I'd put it. Not by much. The gray oval of scuffed dirt was cold and empty. The tent now stood a long stride to the right, square and taut and wrong. A shallow groove ran between old and new as if a box had been dragged carefully. No prints. Behind a rear corner, someone had stacked 3 pebbles, the top one streaked white. I invented wind strong enough to sort nylon without scuffing a stone. I invented raccoons with apprenticeships in knotwork. Pride burns embarrassment for fuel. I boiled coffee on top of it. Noon ticked and I texted Elena a picture like proof. All good. Around midday, a couple came up the old road, new to each other and to pretending not to be tired. He wore Chucks. She wore the determined smile of someone who won't be the reason they turn around. They asked about water and flats. I pointed downslope toward a half-collapsed shelter, old poles now part of the earth. "You hear a zipper last night?" the girl asked too casually. We all laughed like people do when a thought is formless and already embarrassing. Toward dusk, I tied a guy line around a pine and double-staked the others. Because if something was going to make a fool of me, I wanted legible handwriting. I lay down with my palm on the zipper. The wind moved just outside the circle of light. I half-dozed. What woke me was a hand on the roof. A palm, I swear it, smoothing from my feet up my side, across my shoulder. then pressing gently where my head made a bump. The fabric whispered like someone wiping a table with a damp cloth. I kept still. At dawn, the tent stood 30 feet deeper in the trees, handsome as a catalog photo. The guy line I'd tied around the pine had been retied around a different trunk, with a knot I knew only from a book. The vestibule now faced a narrow corridor between two boulders. The ground had been combed clean. Behind the heel sat a new cairn, 4 stones this time, one the size of a coin with a crescent of quartz. I walked 10 steps into the corridor. Cool air stroked my shins. It smelled like pennies and wet ash. A fly droned ahead and cut out as if a door had closed on it. I turned back and my stomach did the small roll it does when an elevator starts without you. The tent looked exactly right in the wrong place. The couple passed again near noon, cheeks salted by work. "Did your tent move?" the guy blurted. The girl pointed to flattened stems. "We woke up and ours was politely relocated. Door line to a different tree. Food bag retied with a better knot than mine." She tried to smile and couldn't carry it. "If you hear tapping, don't open the zipper," she said. Then they laughed too loud and walked on, holding hands like that could anchor them to something that didn't like knots. If the story were sensible, I would have packed then. Instead, I rolled the tent, carried it to the car, stood with the hatch open and put it back on my shoulder. Pried again and something else with the same gait. Invitation. I pitched on the lip of the corridor as the light went slow orange. Tap-tap came from deeper in the rocks, delicate as fingers on a tabletop. Then closer, a zipper lifting in 3 short pulls. The smoothing hand returned and patted a wrinkle flat with the approval of a tailor. I slept there. I can't defend it except to say it felt correct, like a picture finally level. The dreams came thin and gray. I walked down a chalk stair. Air pressed my ears until I could hear my breath inside my skull. Something breathed back from beneath the steps, keeping time. The hand moved under me, not over, and when I woke I knew the floor had spent the night propped on something that could rise. Morning. The vestibule unzipped, the fly pinned like a curtain. The corridor ended in an oval depression girded with roots and old boards, a den rather than a pit. Its lip was belted with tiny stacks of stones, scores of them, each a little monument to someone's attention. Inside, bones lay as if poured there and then arranged by a creature with nests on its mind. A ring of small femurs, ribs in a tidy heap, a skull furred with moss. Mostly animal. Mostly. In the center sat a flattened shape in the dirt, as if something had bedded there. There was a dime half buried near my boot, blackened, the nick on Roosevelt making him squint. When I looked up, the tent had been moved into the den for me, door aimed at the center, stakes set with a certainty that made my throat feel tight. I pulled the poles with soft sighs and folded the fabric. Beneath the floor, the dirt showed dark ovals where my shoulders had sweated. I put the tent in the car and told myself I was leaving. The corridor breathed cool against my back. I left anyway. Sunday afternoon, I found myself turning up the grade again, errands out of order. I parked at a different spur and approached from the west, meaning to check on the couple. Their ring was scattered. The old shelter lay flatter, like a chest after the last breath. In the dust by the stones were bare footprints, small. Heels and toes pointed toward the trees, then fading where the needles began, as if absorbed by the habit of walking there. 2 days later, search and rescue went out for a missing pair. I listened to the scanner on my stoop with the tent bag against my shin. The bag shifted once. Fabric resettling, I told myself. Poles remembering a curve. Night came down like a lid. The zipper on the bag worked itself open a finger's width. Tap, tap, once, asking permission to make things neat. I stood a long time with my hand on the pack. Through the layers, I felt that patient palm, that practiced pressure, smoothing in the direction it wanted. When I finally slept, I dreamed a floor rising to meet me while I lay perfectly still. Morning came blunt and bright. My little yard held a green tent pitched on the only scrap of dirt that will take a stake. The door faced the side gate so it aligned with the slat that has a knot like an eye. The vestibule pole had no kink. The fabric looked new, the green deeper than undershop lights. I made coffee and it tasted like copper. I set the dime on the table. It wouldn't lie flat. It leaned as if something had slid a fingernail under it. The tent's door was open a handspan, inviting in a way that feels like a trap only if you think from yourself outward. I told myself I would carry it back to the den the way you scoop a spider, and watch it choose a corner. That's the sentence people use when they need to pretend they're giving orders to a river. By afternoon, the tent had inched closer to the porch steps, stake by patient stake, exactly as far as a person would drag it if he didn't want to scuff the wood. Tap-tap came from inside the house, the little table by the door where we drop keys. Elena texted to ask if I'd seen the alert about the missing couple. I typed, "Yeah, Carnes will find them," and erased the line where I wanted to say the Woods are very good at setting a place. It is late as I write this. The tent sits a handspan from the threshold, door facing inward now. I could duck and be on the floor in a single thoughtless motion. I can feel it smoothing already, the way a bed adjusts after a long day. The dime has rotated so the nick looks toward the door. The hand I feel isn't outside anymore. It is inside my head, polite, filing my thoughts the way you line up stakes before you hammer them. I understand what it is, I think. Not a creature, a habit, a practiced arrangement. If I leave the light on, the green fabric goes pale and the shadows inside look like chairs for the correctly delayed. I could call Carnes, I could wake Elena. Or I could crawl in just to straighten a wrinkle in the floor. The door is open exactly as wide as my shoulders. The last campsite isn't on a map. It's the one that moves to where you are, patient as a hand, arranging you toward where you belong. I haven't decided yet. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it wants to decide for me, a little more each night.